In this podcast episode, the discussion revolves around the current political landscape in the United States, particularly focusing on the upcoming 2024 election. Shapiro argues that Donald Trump has positioned himself as the centrist candidate in the race, contrasting him with Joe Biden, who is perceived as moving towards the radical left. He points out that Trump's shift towards the center on major issues has contributed to his strong performance in polls, surpassing his numbers from previous elections. Polling data is cited to illustrate Trump's lead in battleground states, with the exception of Pennsylvania, where he trails slightly. Shapiro highlights the narrowing gap between registered Democrats and Republicans, indicating a shift in voter affiliation towards the Republican Party. He notes that Republicans have made gains among certain demographics, while Democrats have maintained support from key constituencies like Black and younger voters. The discussion also touches on criticisms of Biden's political strategy, with former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain questioning the president's focus on long-term infrastructure projects over immediate economic needs. Shapiro emphasizes the economic challenges facing Americans, particularly in light of rising inflation and the impact on wages. Democrats are portrayed as increasingly desperate, with Pelosi and Schumer continuing to push narratives linking Trump to foreign interference and tyranny. Shapiro criticizes their tactics, pointing out instances where Democrats have themselves engaged in questionable behavior, such as using federal agencies to suppress information and push their agenda. Shapiro continues by highlighting the political landscape in Arizona, where Democrats are pushing to repeal a 1864 law that restricts abortion. He mentions that there are some Republicans in the state who may vote with Democrats to get rid of this law. Shapiro explains that if the 1864 law is repealed, a 2022 law passed during the tenure of a Republican governor, Doug Ducey, would come into effect. This law imposes a 15-week ban on abortions. He speculates that Arizona's Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, may succeed in repealing the 1864 law with the support of some dodgy Republicans. This move is seen as a political strategy by Democrats to elevate the issue to the federal level. Shapiro points out that Democrats are hoping to shift the focus to the federal level to pin the pro-life stance on Donald Trump. Despite Trump's stance of leaving abortion laws to the states, Democrats are trying to portray him as a tyrant who wants control over such matters. They aim to make Trump appear more extreme on abortion compared to their own stance, which advocates for federal legislation supporting abortion rights. Shapiro delves into the media bias surrounding the coverage of Trump's abortion stance. He criticizes how the media, influenced by the Biden campaign, altered headlines to misrepresent Trump's position. Despite Trump's clear statement of leaving abortion laws to the states, the media twisted the narrative to suit the Democratic agenda. Shapiro emphasizes the importance of understanding the distinction between state and federal laws, especially in the context of abortion legislation. He underscores the role of states as laboratories for testing different policies and the significance of federalism in allowing states to make decisions based on their unique circumstances. Shapiro highlights the desire of most Americans for stability in politics, emphasizing the need for predictability and non-radical approaches. He criticizes both parties for labeling each other as radical and falling prey to their extreme factions. He points out the danger of surrendering to radical bases within the parties, citing Marjorie Taylor Greene as an example of a legislator who prioritizes personal fame over responsible governance. Marjorie Taylor Greene's controversial statements and actions are discussed, with Shapiro highlighting her divisive tactics and lack of consistency in conservative principles. Greene's recent threat to challenge Mike Johnson, a more conservative legislator, reflects her disruptive approach within the Republican Party. Shapiro warns against allowing fringe elements to dictate party decisions, as it could lead to a loss of power and credibility. Shapiro criticizes the Republican caucus for caving to social media-driven legislators like Greene, urging them to focus on effective governance rather than seeking attention. He emphasizes the importance of distinguishing between passionate activism and responsible legislating, suggesting that the former should not drive policy decisions. Shapiro calls for a return to principled governance and a rejection of chaotic and radical influences within the party. Shapiro criticizes Joe Biden for aligning with the radical left on issues like the Israel-Hamas conflict, pointing out the dangers of appeasing extremist elements within the party. He questions Biden's approach to foreign policy, particularly his calls for a ceasefire without addressing American hostages held by Hamas. Shapiro highlights the conflicting messages from the Biden administration regarding Israel, with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin clarifying that there is no evidence of genocide in Gaza. He criticizes Democrats like Tim Kaine for advocating to restrict offensive aid to Israel, emphasizing the importance of supporting Israel's right to defend itself against terrorist threats. Shapiro condemns Nancy Pelosi's call for a ceasefire without holding Hamas accountable for its actions, pointing out the moral ambiguity in such a stance. The podcast delves into the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, with Shapiro emphasizing the need for moral clarity and support for Israel's right to self-defense. He criticizes Democrats for adopting a one-sided approach that undermines Israel's security and emboldens terrorist groups like Hamas. He warns against losing sight of the realities of war and the necessity of defending democratic allies like Israel against terrorist aggression.